Hello and welcome to the official Wrestling News 365 YouTube channel. Thank you very, very much for joining us here today. This is your NWA Power review for the November 19, 2019 edition of NWA Power. As always, this week NWA Power emanated from Atlanta, Georgia, in the GPB studios for yet another episode on the official NWA YouTube channel. So a little structure to the review. If you're new to listen to any of our reviews, we'll break down every segment of the show. I'll give you my thoughts on yesterday's proceedings, and we'll also see what you, our great followers, all thought of tonight's episode. At the end of every episode of NWA Power, we send out a Twitter post on our official Twitter account at 365Wrestle, asking our followers to describe NWA Power in 3 words. I think this week our followers have a lot of 3 words to describe NWA Power. At the end of the review, we'll take a look at some of your responses, and I'll pick out some of my favourites, both positive and negative, and check out your opinions on the show. So make sure you stay to the end of the video to see if you've made the list, as Chris Jericho would say. Now, before we get into the review, we have to address the elephant in the room. We have to address the Jim Cornette controversy. During the Nick Aldis versus Trevor Murdoch opening match of the show, Cornette said the following line when referring to Trevor Murdoch, quote, "He's the only man I've ever known who can strap a bucket of fried chicken on his back and ride a motor scooter across Ethiopia," end quote. Wow, I know, right? I mean, where'd you start? I mean, This isn't a live show. This is taped. These NWA Power shows were taped at the end of September, start of October. That's 7 weeks ago. I mean, how this made it to the air should have an inquest to itself. But Jim Cornette should be ashamed. End of. That's offensive stereotypes in so many ways. I mean, just for a cheap laugh, for a throwaway line. Not only should the NWA apologise, but so should Cornette. At this time of recording, I don't think he's made a comment on it. But he's a divisive character enough as it is. But that's a step too far. It's not funny, period. At a time when there's so much divisive tension in society, I and we all don't need this archaic, lowbrow dinosaur humour in our wrestling show. Just because you've gone back in time to studio wrestling doesn't make it acceptable to repeat lines used in the 50s and 60s. And I'm also frankly stunned that they, the NWA, left it in the show, to which they should also be ashamed by. This isn't a case of, it slipped through the cracks, No, it's a tape show with tape segments, which sometimes they take the segments out of order and then put them together in post-production. You would have had to have watched the episode at least a handful of times, and therefore whoever edited this would have assumed that it was an okay line fit for broadcast. Well, it wasn't. It was just inappropriate. It's no place in society, let alone pro wrestling. NWA Vice President David Lagana tweeted, quote, "On tonight's episode of NWA Power, airing November 19th, 2019, one of our talents made comments which some viewers found offensive. We deeply regret the error and apologise. We have temporarily taken down the programme while we correct this error," end quote. Now, Lagana didn't mention Cornette there by name, but when they took the programme down and put it back up, the Cornette line was edited out, so it obviously was Jim Cornette there. And I think the reason they didn't mention his name most likely is they're trying to save face here, really. They're trying to apologise without exposing too much what Cornette has said, because the line is truly that bad. But an apology isn't enough here. Action needs to be taken. And I'm one of the people that actually likes Cornette. I find him entertaining as hell. I love his shoots he's done in the past with kayfabe commentaries, and just, that Jim Cornette character. It's great. It's entertaining. But when he says things like this, or some of the other statements he's made in the past on social media, it's not okay. And the more we let him off with he's just a grumpy old man Cornette, that's just his character, then we're enabling that kind of unacceptable behaviour. Now, whether or not Cornette appears at the pay-per-view Into the Fire on December 14 and the following TV tapings, we'll have to wait and see. My guess is that after a series of polarising and ignorant statements on social media as of late, this may be one controversy too far for James E. And he only has himself to blame. And it's a shame, it really is, because these NWA Power shows have been terrific. But if you look on Twitter, and as you'll see at the end of this video, from our followers at least, it soured the programme for many. Now, as I touched on, the NWA temporarily pulled the latest episode of the show because of the comment made by Jim Cornette. However, the show is now back on their YouTube channel with that offensive remark edited out. And, you know, Cornette recently likes, well, not just recently, throughout however long he's been Jim Cornette, he likes to criticise certain wrestlers for the Outlaw Mud Show type performances. You hear him talk about Joey Janela and Darby Allin, Joey Ryan. Well, this is a prime example of Outlaw Mud Show outdated bullshit commentary. NWA, Jim Cornette, you should be ashamed. So let's start the show. A highlight package of the issue of NWA World's Heavyweight Champion Nick Aldis not letting Camille speak. We then recap last week with Colt Cabana winning the National Championship and James Storm saying he's coming out of the killer whale, Nick Aldis. We then have the opening package with the theme song Into the Fire. I know it's been, eight episodes? Or 7 episodes? 7 or 8 episodes? But this is our first video, obviously, on the channel. So I'll say it again, that intro is awesome. Into the Fire is awesome. It's a great throwback. It really does set the tempo for a show, having a really great intro. We've noticed it more recently with the likes of Raw and SmackDown, when they've revamped their intros, and they actually have intros every week. For the longest time they didn't, and yeah, it sets the tone for the show. I had someone on Twitter comment before that it didn't matter about intros to the show. It certainly does. Back in the Attitude Era with the then WWF for Monday Night Raw, that Attitude Era intro, it sets the tone for the show. It's high octane, it gets people into it, and that's exactly what this does for the NWA Power show. We start off the show with Dave Marquez interviewing NWA World's Heavyweight Champion, the National Treasure, Nick Aldis. Dave Marquez says he's got to know about Camille, who is noticeably absent from the segment. Nick Aldis says if you don't see Camille by his side, her actions are her own and nothing to do with him. He says he will continue to prove why he's the NWA World's Heavyweight Champion, whilst his next challenger for Sweet Charlotte, the 10 pounds of gold, is chosen. He talks about facing Trevor Murdoch next. He says it will be an exhibition and not a world title match. He says that it won't be a tune-up, but for Trevor, he's been on a long sabbatical and nothing but love and respect, but it will be an exhibition. He talks about Trevor only looking at the 10 pounds of gold behind the glass at Harley Race's house, but that might be the closest he'll get. It's a strange one with Nick Aldis because I'm still struggling to see if he's a heel or a babyface. Maybe that's the point. You have him showing respect to past greats, and you have him showing respect to certain wrestlers, but you also have him doing sort of backhanded compliments like he's doing here to Trevor Murdoch, or insinuating that he's not letting Camille speak. It's almost like a tweener situation at the moment, which is interesting. I think his best work is as a heel. He's always played a heel historically, and that's his best work. I think he fits into that Ric Flair / Harley Race kind of NWA World Heavyweight Champion, where they just need to be the heel, like the man, you know, without slying at Becky Lynch there. So we have our match. We have Nick Aldis versus Trevor Murdoch. Handshake to start the match. Commentary puts over that Aldis might be underestimating Murdoch and not taking him too seriously, calling it an exhibition as opposed to an actual match. They do a little bit of chain wrestling, and then Trevor Murdoch kicks the middle rope right into the lower regions of Aldis after a clean break, which gets a nice pop. And then Trevor Murdoch hits a trilogy of scoop slams, 3 scoop slams in a row, and it gets a pop. That is only something you will hear in the NWA with that studio audience. Can you imagine in WWE 3 body slams, getting a reaction. I mean, on Monday Night Raw, Buddy Murphy caught Akira Tozawa mid-air from a suicide dive and suplexed him on the floor, and it got nothing, even from commentary. So to see the opposite end of the spectrum and see a trilogy of scoop slams get a nice pop is something quite nice to see. Trevor Murdoch then hits a bulldog from the top rope. They play off that it might be an upset for Aldis, but Aldis gets his foot on the rope, which at this point, I mean, after what we saw on Monday and what we appear to see on every episode of wrestling across the board, the foot on the rope spot is probably the most overdone spot in professional wrestling at this point. Apart from the suicide dive, obviously it would appear, because you've got to get that dive in. Murdoch then goes at the top again and appears to sort of botch a drop kick from the top rope. Aldis counters this into the cloverleaf for the submission victory. Post-match, crowd chants, "Thank you, Murdoch." And Aldis says, "You're a crafty bastard, but I respect you," followed by a handshake to the crowd's applause. It was a fun match, a solid opener. On these shows, because of the time constraints and because it's studio wrestling, you're not really likely, maybe occasionally, but you're not. It's going to be rare that you get this, 20-minute, 15-minute epic, or even with the openers, or 15, even 10-minute opener. They're matches to further the story, I would say. But this was fun. It's like I said, Aldis is always compelling television. It's interesting to see what role he's actually going to play. But I think Aldis is the perfect guy to be champion at this point. I can't see many other people currently on the NWA roster that actually would fit that role as well as Nick Aldis does to be the NWA champion. So it was a fun opener. Next we have a Rock and Roll Express interview with Dave Marquez. Ricky Morton talks about being their upcoming NWA Tag Team Championship shot, hoping to become 9-time World Tag Team Champions. Out come the current NWA Tag Team Champions Tom Latimer and Royce Isaacs. They say there's no way the Rock and Roll Express are getting their hands on their Tag Team Championships, and Latimer says the Rock and Roll Express can kiss his ass. They then shout wild cards. It was awkward, but okay. Dave Marquez then changes the subject and asks Latimer what his relationship is with Camille, which gets an ooh from the crowd. To which Latimer responds, "We're just friends," before walking off. The Rock and Roll Express are everywhere at the moment, it would appear. Obviously appearing here in the NWA, but also on AEW at Dynamite and Full Gear recently. They were recently at the House of Glory show this past weekend, and I'm all for it. What a second wind they're having. It's a guilty pleasure of mine, I won't lie. I like the story. These are guys in their 60s. 60s. Can you imagine they still can go, they still look great, and they can still sort of go. It's another good story to tell on NWA TV. So I'm all for it. And then you see the way that they're used on AEW is the way that I would truly prefer for them to be used if you're going to use them. And that by getting heat on Santana and Ortiz when they powerbombed Ricky Morton through the stage, and then they get the redemption at Full Gear to a good moment. So it's not a case of them, coming in and Hulk Hogan it and holding down younger talent, brother. They're still getting a reaction from the crowd, and that's the most important thing. On the flip side, this whole Camille story with Tom Latimer, is it slightly soap opera-esque? Yes, and that's not completely to my taste. I know some people do like it. It's not to my taste. In my opinion, we get enough of the love triangle BS on Monday Night Raw every week at the moment. We'll see where they're going with it. Obviously, they're telling a story in long form, so we'll have to see. I'd rather have the main story in the program be over the World Heavyweight Championship like they had with Tim Storm and Nick Aldis, but we'll see where it goes. They're obviously playing it in long form, so we'll see. We next see a video package of the Question Mark's debut last week, which is followed by NWA National Heavyweight Champion Colt Cabana on commentary, which leads to our next match, Ricky Starks versus the most over guy, arguably in all of professional wrestling right now. Big statement. certainly is over with that Atlanta studio audience. The question mark, yes. Now, if you go back to watch NWA Power for any reason this week, you should go back to see the pop and hear the pop that the question mark received when he walked out for this first match. I mean, I don't know how many people are in that studio audience, maybe 100, 200. But when he walks out, you would think that he'd walked out in Madison Square Garden in the middle of the Attitude Era. That whole, I wouldn't call it arena, that studio exploded. It was phenomenal. Honestly, just go back and watch it. It's crazy. He's so over with that Atlanta TV studio audience. It's bizarre, but it's crazy. It would appear that it's Josephus underneath that mask, or at least it looks like him anyway. The question mark does his karate-style strikes and chops to Ricky Starks in the match. Starks goes for a suicide dive, but then sort of stops once he lands on the outside. It looked a bit awkward. I don't know if he was hesitant on actually doing a full dive onto that studio floor. That looks pretty brutal, that floor. It looked a bit awkward. Then out of nowhere, Aaron Stevens rushes out and attacks Ricky Starks, assisting the question mark. And every time the question mark hit his sort of karate thrust, the crowd would go nuts. And then Stevens would respond with a cartwheel. They did that at least like twice. It was excellent. It terrifically entertaining. After seemingly just sort of sitting there and allowing Ricky Starks to get attacked, Colt Cabana finally makes the save before the question mark could hit a third throat thrust, and Aaron Stevens could apparently do a third cartwheel. The question mark and then Stevens posed to the crowd every time, and every time the question mark posed, the crowd would cheer. And every time Stevens they would boo. It was similar to the way that The Miz and Damien Mizdow used to do the crowd participation in WWE, where The Miz would raise his hands, crowd boos. Mizdow would raise his hand, the crowd would cheer. Really, really fun. The match at this point was almost secondary. But with the question mark and Aaron Stevens, you have two complete characters. It's less about the wrestling, more about the character. And the crowd loves it. And you can't criticize. The crowd knows best. So I'm all here for it. I know it can seem slightly hypocritical. I'm saying I don't like some of the goofy other stuff they do with Camille, but then I like this stuff. So I mean, it's to everyone's taste, and that's what wrestling is. It's good taste and bad taste. Jim Cornette then announces that the question mark and Aaron Stevens versus Ricky Starks and Colt Cabana will be the main event tonight. We then have an interview at the podium with Eli Drake. Eli Drake talks about Ken Anderson making noise. He says Ken Anderson is past his sell-by date, which leads Ken Anderson to come out. Anderson says he's been on the smallest stages, bars, armories, bar mitzvahs and birthdays. I don't know about you, but I would love to see that birthday party. Oh, what did you get me, Mum, for my birthday? What did you get me? Oh, we got you Ken Anderson. Oh, Ken Anderson. Maybe slightly outdated. You got me Ken Anderson action figure? No, Ken Anderson, real guy. He's sitting in the living room talking shit about Bob Holly and Randy Orton. He also says that he's also competed on the grandest stage of them all, which he has, winning, obviously, competing at various WrestleManias, winning Money in the Bank at WrestleMania 23. He says he's sick and tired of Eli Drake running his jibs and challenges him to a match right now. Eli Drake stares at him for a little bit and then takes off his jacket, and appears that we're going to have a Ken Anderson-Eli Drake match in the ring. But once Ken Anderson turns his back, he reaches behind the podium, he being Eli Drake, pronouns, and grabs a turnbuckle and hits Ken Anderson in the back with it. Cornette then sells that Ken Anderson is really hurt. Eli Drake then comes back out with a turnbuckle, attempting to do it again, but is prevented by referees and Crimson from TNA, former Impact Wrestling star, who appears to be working behind the scenes. The turnbuckle spot was quite interesting. I guess there's a turnbuckle behind the podium just in case one breaks when they're setting up the ring. I don't know. Interesting use of weapon. I can't think the last time I saw an actual turnbuckle itself to be used as a weapon. And they tried to sell seriously that this was a legitimate injury angle, which is good. The only criticism I would have of it would be the placement of it. When you go from something that comical and entertaining like the whole Aaron Stevens question mark situation, it's very difficult to follow that with a very, very serious injury angle. You kind of need a buffer in between, I would say, to make that actually resonate a bit more, because the crowd was still hot for the question mark and Aaron Stevens whole incident that happened before, and at the start of the segment they bring it up again by saying that it's going to be the main event, so it's still on the crowd's mind. So I'm not sure really about the placement of that. Next up, we have Allysin Kay and Ashley Vox. Allysin Kay, obviously the NWA Women's Champion, against Thunder Rosa and Marty Bow. Marty Bow hits a bicycle kick on Ashley Vox and then tags in Thunder Rosa, who hits, one of the most brutal chops. It was awesome. She then talks trash to Allysin Kay as she works over Ashley Vox. Vox hits a drop kick off the top and then tags in Allysin Kay, who brawls with Thunder Rosa. Allysin Kay then hits a superplex on Thunder Rosa for a second row. Crowd pops and chants NWA. Once again, something you're only going to see in NWA. Not the crowd chant NWA, obviously. You're obviously only going to see that in NWA. But getting a pop from a superplex, that's par for the course nowadays in professional wrestling, isn't it? Then we see walking down the stairs through the crowd is Melina. Yes, that Melina from Eminem fame. Melina's appearance causes Allysin Kay to be distracted, which allows Thunder Rosa to roll her up for the victory. Post-match, Thunder Rosa continues to attack Kay with a double foot stomp off the top rope. Melina then poses with Thunder Rosa and Marty Bow after the match, so it would appear that they now have a manager. On commentary, they were referring to Melina as a legend in women's wrestling. Now, that would be debatable, but obviously not if you're Cameron from WWE, though. Her favourite match, of course, is Melina versus Alicia Fox, after all. So, a legendary figure in the Cameron household, or amongst the Funkadactyl circles in professional wrestling. And onto our main event. Ricky Starks and NWA National Heavyweight Champion Colt Cabana versus Aaron Stevens, and yes, the same man, the question mark, once again. Just looking at my notes here, the first thing I had written down is the question mark is seriously so over. The crowd would just go nuts. Although, again, Jim Cornette here says the question mark looks like 10 pounds of crap in a 5-pound bag. But after the first line, I would think I was just tuning out Cornette by this point. Both men work over Ricky Starks. Aaron Stevens then does his own karate chops, to which the crowd boo. The question mark then does a karate chops of his own, which the crowd cheer. Just really fun. It was really fun to watch. They then continue to isolate Ricky Starks. Aaron Stevens then moons to the crowd. Yes, you heard me, moon. He removes his pants and moons to the crowd. That is heel heat in 2019, my friends. Back in the day, it would be making the kids cry. Nowadays, it is showing your bare ass to a studio audience. Gotta have that heel heat. Starks then hits a sling blade on Aaron Stevens with a hot tag then to Cabana. Cabana works over Aaron Stevens using Stevens' scarf that he's wearing for leverage. At this point, Stevens wasn't actually in ring gear. He was just in his sort of usual pompous Hollywood attire. It was ridiculous, but it was fun. Starks then attempts to remove the question mark's mask, but Stevens breaks it up. The question mark then hits Stark with a spike, to which Stevens tags in and picks up the victory. Yes, they got the victory over one of the up-and-comers. I saw people criticising whether they should actually be pinning. They're trying to build up Ricky Starks as this guy that can be the future of the NWA, and him getting pinned after a karate chop to the throat by the question mark doesn't do him any favours. But, Stevens and question mark are over. You can't argue with that. And it was great heel heat for Stevens, as he did none of the work, but tags in and gets to finish anyway. Stevens then grabs the microphone at the podium and said that they did it with the power of karate. The question mark then grabs him and corrects him, saying it's karate. Rich gets a big pop. And then Dave Marquez is about to sign off of the show, says that's all the time we have. And then suddenly we're interrupted by James Storm. He comes out and calls out NWA World Heavyweight Champion Nick Aldis for doing exhibition matches, and then says that we have to watch this bullshit out here, referring to the question mark fiasco, immediately becoming the top heel if you talk shit about the question mark in front of this Atlanta crowd. I mean, honestly, just go out there and say it's dumb. You get booed out of the building. He then runs down Colt Cabana, saying he's involved in matches like that, whilst when he was National Heavyweight Champion, he was defending the championship. But then he is interrupted by Camille, who makes an appearance, who whispers something to James Storm, and then walks off. James Storm smiles and says, sorry about your damn luck, and that's the show. So we end on a cliffhanger there. Now, I was complaining about this in the Raw review the other day. That's how you do a cliffhanger. When I was complaining about the cliffhangers on Raw, when they faded to commercial, or they just stopped the segment of people just staring, or something like that, it's dumb. It's stupid. And it doesn't make any sense. So it's the Andy from Toy Story principle. Once the Andy comes in the room, the toys stop playing. It's the same thing in WWE. Once it goes to commercial, everyone stands still. This is a cliffhanger. It makes you think, what did she say? We'll have to tune in next week or into the pay-per-view to find out what she said. So, overall thoughts. Overall, obviously, with the whole Jim Cornette comment situation aside, I thought it was a fun show. I mean, these NWA Power shows go so fast and they're so different. So it's really easy and fun to watch. It's a shame that that's all secondary now, because the only thing that people will be and are talking about is the Jim Cornette controversy. I thought the women's match went maybe slightly too long, and I'm not so keen on the drums at the end of the Thunder Rosa segments, but I will give credit. I think Thunder Rosa, to me, looks an absolute star. Her face paint, whilst people are going to say, similar to Darby Allin, I don't know who came first, so you can tell me in the comments below who came first. But I think the face paint looks great. Her mannerisms are great. She, to me, has got everything to be a future champion. I think eventually she most likely will get the bout. But she, to me, looks like a star. That's a positive in that division. Heaven knows people like AEW could use more female stars in their division. As hokey as it is, I loved the question mark stuff. I'm a big fan of Aaron Stevens as well. Back when he was Damien Sandow, back when he was Damien Mizdow, he's always entertaining. Is the whole thing over the top? Absolutely, definitely. Is it too much? Again, that would depend on your taste. I thought it was fun. Which sometimes an hour show like this, you need a bit of fun. Does it have legs? Can it continue for a long period of time? Probably not. Realistically, I mean, there's only so far you can probably go of a character like the question mark. Characters eventually have to show some grit and they have to get serious eventually. But it was fun, and it will be fun while it lasts. The ending, like I said, keeps you hooked for next week, so you can't complain about that. And you're not sure where they're going with it, which is fun. Aldis is almost in this tweener role for me, that it would appear that he's not letting Camille speak, yet he's paying respect to people in the ring. So I'm not too sure where his character is headed, but that's a good thing. It shouldn't be predictable. Sometimes that's the biggest problem with professional wrestling, is that it can be so predictable. The story's been done over and over and over again. So to not know where the character's headed is a good thing. For me, my prediction, I think it's set up for Camille to turn on Aldis, and then when she does speak, she unleashes fire on him about how he never let her talk, speak, do anything, etc., etc. She was the reason he's NWA World Heavyweight Champion still. But I mean, it could be wrong. That's just me. That's just me predicting. So yeah, I thought it was a fun show. Anyway, let's get on to your opinions. NWA Power in 3 words. At the end of every episode of NWA Power, we send out a Twitter post on our official Twitter account at 365Wrestle. Go give us a follow, asking our followers to describe NWA Power in 3 words. Let's take a look and see what our followers thought of tonight's episode of NWA Power. At ZeusKing_Dark says, into the fire, or fire, however you want to pronounce that. Obviously referring to the intro for NWA Power, as I mentioned. I think that intro is absolutely awesome. At 8-Bit Ray says, Cornette's Ethiopian joke, which speaks for itself. As I mentioned, this is the one thing I suppose that everyone's going to talk about as opposed to the action, which is a shame, but they should be talking. This is also referred to by Wonka666, who says bucket of chicken. Super Saiyan 97 says great simple wrestling, which is pretty much been NWA Power's staple so far, hasn't it? Which is the sort of the novelty of it, is that it's simple but good storytelling. At Best of Wrestling says Phoenix has risen, which was the episode title to tonight's show. Dog69, or Dog, however you want to say it, 69 says Cornette's a racist. Obviously feeling strong about the Cornette line there. And I mean, I always am hesitant to fully call people out with things like that and use those terms, because people can say things, but it doesn't truly reflect their opinion on things. I know I sound like I'm defending Jim Cornette there, and I'm really not. But that you say those lines, you're gonna get those criticisms. End of. And finally, Red Rain 231 says fried chicken Ethiopia, which speaks for itself, doesn't it? But what did you think of the show? Let us know your thoughts on tonight's episode in the comments section below. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Once we get to that magic number of 1,000 subscribers, we'll be able to do live reviews for every show, and then really get our great followers more involved in our reviews. That is our aim, 1,000 subscribers. We need all our help from our great fans, so if you can get us there, we would be eternally grateful. Don't forget, you can follow Wrestle News 365 on all our social media platforms on the screen right now. Twitter, at 365Wrestle. Facebook, at Wrestle News 365. Instagram, at Wrestle News 365. Storyfire, you guessed it. Can you guess it? What is it going to be? Oh yeah, at Wrestle News 365, keeping it simple. We'll be uploading exclusive content to our Storyfire channel every Saturday and Sunday, so be sure to subscribe over there to not miss any of the action you won't be able to find anywhere else. You can also visit our website, WrestleNews365.com, for all the very latest news, reviews, exclusive series and much more. That's WrestleNews365.com. You can also support Wrestle News 365 by purchasing our merchandise. Visit WN365.com. That's WN365.com for all our merch and apparel. If you do purchase an item, be sure to post it, easy for me to say, on social media so we can share it with all of our followers. We really, really appreciate all your support. Thank you very much for watching. God, I can't even talk. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for watching as well. We really appreciate it. For watching, listening, streaming, or however you've come across this video today. We really do appreciate it, and we'll speak with you again very soon. Soon.